Buongiorno. Today we're going to be talking about are verbi in the present tense, or are verbs in the present tense. The infinitive is a to form of the verb. In English, this would be equivalent to eat, to study, to arrive, etc. The Italian infinitive can be identified by its ending. They typically end in are, are, or r, and era, or ire. The focus of today's lesson will be on this first group, this are group. Imparo italiano can mean three things in Italian. This present tense expression can mean I learn Italian, I am learning Italian, or I do learn Italian. Also, the present tense can be used to indicate something that will happen in the near future. So if you're going to be learning Italian this evening or tomorrow, you might say imparo l'italiano. ARA endings are as follows: o, I, a, iamo, ate, anno. And to conjugate the verb, what we would do is we would remove the ARA and we simply add one of these endings. So once again, it is o, I, a, iamo, ate, and anno. Well, here's an example with the verb lavorare, to work. I would say io lavoro, tu lavori, lei lavora, lui or lei lavora, noi lavoriamo, voi lavorate, and loro lavorano. So without the subject pronouns, it would be lavoro, lavori, lavora, lavoriamo, lavorate, and lavorano. In the present tense, there are a couple things that do happen with the spelling due to the way certain verbs end. For example, with the verb cominciare, studiare, and mangiare, because we add an E or an I in English in the to form, and an iamo in the noi form, we're going to end up with a double I once we drop that ARE ending and add those new endings to it. So really what's not necessary is to have it, because for the phonetics we have the sound we're looking for. So what we have is in a to form we would have tu studi with one I rather than ending the extra I in the to form ending. And we would have noi studiamo, and we don't include two I's. We don't include that extra I that we have that comes along with the iamo ending. And this would be true also for the verbs mangiare and cominciare.
With present tense verbs, there is one thing we want to note about the spelling of gare and care verbs. What we do is after the stem, between the stem and the ending, in the to and the noi forms, we use an H or an H in Italian. And the reason we do this is to preserve the hard sound of the C or the G. Essentially what we're doing here is just maintaining the sound of the infinitive. So with the verb dimenticare, we have a hard C. Now if I weren't to put that H in there, the sound wouldn't be dimentichi, but it would be dimentici. So again, that H is very important for the phonetics. The same thing occurs with the noi form. Because we're adding an iamo, and the combination of an I and a C would give us a soft sound, we want to add the H. And so it becomes noi dimentichiamo. The same thing happens with the verb spiegare, because it's a verb that ends in gare. And as you may remember, the C and the G sounds are very similar. When you add an I or an E after those, it's a soft sound. Well, to preserve the sound of the stem, what we do is we insert an H. So instead of becoming spiegi, it becomes spieghi, gi. Spiegare means to explain. So if we want to say you explain, we say tu spieghi. The same thing occurs in a noi form because we're adding an iamo, so that I sound once again, and the I sound following a G would be soft. Well, to avoid that and maintain that hard sound of the infinitive, the spiega, the gare sound, we added an H. So it becomes noi spieghiamo. Now let's take a look at some conversazione, a little conversational practice. If I ask you the question, where do you eat, meaning you all plural, I would say, dove mangiate? I could respond by saying, Giovanni eats at home while I eat at work. Giovanni mangia a casa e io mangio a lavoro. Giovanni eats at home and I eat at work. I could also ask the question, what do you desire to do? Che cosa desidera fare? And this is either asking you formal, the desidera form, or it could be asking what does he or she desire to do. Luisa desidera uscire e non studiare, meaning Luisa wishes to go out and not to study. One interesting thing to point out here is when we have this verb desidera and it's conjugated, we follow it by a verb in the infinitive. Okay, our next question is, are y'all waiting for the bus? Voi aspettate l'autobus? And notice when I ask questions as well, what we're doing is we're having a little bit of inflection at the end of that sentence. No, non aspettiamo l'autobus. No, we are not waiting for the bus. When I want to make a sentence negative in Italian, I put the non directly in front of the conjugated verb. And notice aspettiamo is a special verb because it has the preposition for built right into it. So, no, non aspettiamo l'autobus. We are not waiting for the bus. If I want to ask, when does the bus arrive? I would say, quando arriva l'autobus? And if I want to say the bus arrives in 5 minutes, I could say, arriva fra 5 minuti. And I'm not repeating the subject of the bus here because it would be understood from the context. Next, I want to ask, what do you all study? Che cosa studiate? If I wanted to say we study Italian on Tuesdays and on Thursdays, I could say, studiamo l'italiano il martedì e il giovedì. When I put the article, the il, in front of the day of the week, whether it's Tuesday in this case or Thursday, it indicates that it's a habitual action. If I wanted to say I only study Italian on Tuesday, or we study Italian on Tuesday, meaning this Tuesday, I would simply say studiamo l'italiano martedì. What is Antonio looking for is our next question. Che cosa cerca Antonio? And if I wanted to say he is searching for the employee, I could say lui cerca l'impiegato. Our next question is, where do you live? Dove abiti? I could say I live in Milan while Marco lives in Bergamo. Abito a Milano, mentre Marco abita a Bergamo. Chi lavora alla fabbrica? Who works at the factory? If I want to say Johnny and Luca work at the factory, I could say Gianni e Luca lavorano alla fabbrica. What do they buy is our next question. Che cosa comprano? If I want to say they buy some fruit and a sandwich, I could say comprano della frutta e un panino. What time does the meeting begin? This question is a che ora, at what time, comincia la riunione? And the answer is the meeting begins at 10 o'clock. La riunione comincia alle 10. E la lezione, a che ora comincia? And the class, when does it begin? Or literally, at what time does it begin? If we wanted to say the class begins at 9:30, we could say la lezione comincia alle 9:30. Our next question is, quando tornate a casa? When do you all return home? And we could respond by saying, we return home at 7 o'clock in the evening. Torniamo a casa alle 7 di sera.